So here's a question that you answer in the book, and this is something I've wondered. The young Earth creationists of all stripes, not just the Creation Museum, they'll say, um, well, we know dinosaurs lived alongside human beings because there are dragon legends in every culture. You know, every single one, China, Japan, you know, Europe, you know, you find these massive reptilian creatures in every single one. Doesn't that prove that something like that existed? Because what are the, you know, if to steal, you know, I'm trying to steel man the argument here. What are the odds that every single culture on the face of the planet would just happen to independently make up giant carnivorous reptiles that are dangerous to humans?
Right, and this was one of the most convincing things to me when I was a young Earth creationist. But so right out the gate, first off, I would say in terms of like evolutionary psychology, the first thing that we have to think about is the fact that serpents have been preying on our species and our species long before it was a species, probably longer than almost any other predator, and exerting more selective force on our species than any other predator. You know, even when we were walking on two legs in Africa, you have to think about all the venomous snakes that would have been picking off our population. So one of the points that I make that a lot of anthropologists and primatologists have made is that serpents, we know this neurologically. There have been studies. Serpents and other things like spiders, for example, are a prototypical stimulus of the fear module within human beings. We come prepackaged, essentially psychologically, to be scared of serpents, to be scared of things like spiders, but serpents more than most any other stimulus. So, like, you know, if I were to hand a snake to a 2-year-old and hand a taser maybe to a 2-year-old, you know, they wouldn't be afraid of the taser. They pick it up and play with it right away. But the snake, you know, they might have some fear just because human beings have been selected for millions of years to have that type of fear. So one of the points that I make, I don't want to dwell on this too long because there's a whole second part of this argument, but if you're a person, you know, in a native tribe and you're trying to engage in this sort of activity of let's dream up a super predator, a mythological monster, then you're going to attribute all sorts of things to it. It'll obviously have claws. Maybe it'll breathe fire, for example. That seems very dangerous. But I would argue more likely than not, very often you're going to attribute serpentine or reptilian aspects to it just because reptiles have had such a massive impression on human psychology and our selection for millions of years, probably more than any other type of predator. So there's that aspect of it. The other aspect of it is that there's a scholar named Adrienne Mayor who's associated with Stanford University, and she spent her career on this subject. Human beings, you know, in the 1800s weren't the first ones to discover fossils. People have been discovering fossils for thousands of years, going all the way back to ancient Rome. And the USA, for example, where I live, especially out west, we have some of the most fossiliferous regions, you know, on the earth. And you can see fossils places like Arizona and Utah and so forth. And I opened this section of the book with the creation myth of the Apache people, as told directly by Geronimo, the Apache warrior. And essentially, he tells this whole creation myth, and it centers around this first person named Apache who defeated this great dragon. And at the end of the myth, he talks about, and you can go to this canyon, and you'll see the bones of the great dragon. They're still there today. What I do in the book is I offer, like, Adrienne Mayor, she's written several books on this subject, talking specifically about ancient Rome and Greece, how people would discover fossils of dinosaurs and interpret them. She does a little bit of work on India, for example, also. And then she has an entire book just based on how Native Americans, almost every Native American culture, you know, was aware of fossils, and they invented all these really, really cool mythologies about them to try to explain, you know, why are there fossils of ancient giant reptiles? A tremendous amount of the dinosaurs that, you know, white people discovered were originally shown to them by Native Americans. It's very likely that the first T-Rex skeleton was shown to a white person by a Sioux Indian boy. And what you typically see within Native American mythology, for example, is that they'll have this mythology about there used to be these ancient dragons, these ancient monsters, because we have all these other fossils of megafauna that aren't dinosaurs as well. there used to be this era of ancient monsters that were on the earth, and then the sun god typically gives human beings this power to turn them to stone, and they become entombed within stone. You get mythologies like this all around the world to explain dinosaur fossils. In particular, I really love an image that I have in the book of a ancient species of giraffe, which was very, very well known within a portion of India. And it's just point blank when you look at this giraffe's skull. The natives of the region are very much aware of them. The skull looks just straight up like a dragon. So I think the Creation Museum has underestimated the degree to which ancient people were discovering these fossils and inventing mythologies around them. How could they not? And this is also a big part of the explanation for why they believed in all sorts of crazy monsters within the past that everyone agrees didn't exist. But you find these giant fossils, you have to invent some sort of explanation for them as an ancient person.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a half truth. Like the dragon legends did come from dinosaurs, but it's not because they were alive. It's because ancient peoples found their remains.
Correct. Yep. Oh yeah, one thing I mentioned in the book is there was this National Geographic report of a paleontologist that went to this remote village. I can't remember which Chinese province, but people there, they had discovered all these dragon fossils within the soil. They were actually I think herbivore dinosaurs, these fossils they were discovering. But the village people, the paleontologist from National Geographic is like, yeah, what is this? What do you think it is? And the people think like, oh, these are just Chinese dragons, flying in the sky. Like they still believe even this was like maybe 10 years ago, they still believe that there are dragons out in the wild flying in the sky. And why wouldn't you? Their fossils are right here. You can see their bones in the soil, while you're doing your agricultural work.
In your book, you have an appendix in which you talk about like some of the specific exhibits they have. And one of them is I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right or not, the Narmer palette.
Right, that's correct.
The Creation Museum claims, this is artistic depictions of brachiosauruses, so this is evidence that dinosaurs lived alongside humans.
And this is talking about some of the depictions from various parts of the world, the Narmer plate. You can see some creatures on here that look very similar to a dinosaur, kind of a long neck. Think of sauropods, stuff like that. If we look at something like an elephant and we just look at their bones, we'd have no idea they have these big ears or big trunks and so forth. So I think sometimes when we look at some of these old actual depictions that people have of dragons, they put extra features on their face, like little beards, tongues, and different things that are coming off of them in some instances. They were probably looking at the real creature, where all we look at today is the bones of these dinosaurs. So sometimes these guys might actually have had a little bit more of an accurate depiction of some of these dinosaurs and dragons.
What is wrong with their claim?
I went and I looked for this mythological creature within museum archive data, and I found out it's actually like one of the most popular types of creature within Egyptian mythology, especially depicted on these artifacts called ivory wands, which were used like in anthropotropic rituals. And in every single case, this thing is a type of cat-like being. It's got a cat head, it's got cat ears, it's got cat tail, and I depict a bunch of images of it in the book, and then I show like a detailed drawing of the Narmer tablet itself, and it's very clearly within Egyptian mythology, it's always a type of cat. But this is an example. There's a lot. There's a handful of examples that I have in the book where it's just blatant that the Creation Museum got this one wrong.
You do have one. It's a Native American pictograph out at Utah, and there you kind of see a picture of a person there. That's our own Buddy Davis. This looks kind of like a flying reptile. Now it's interesting. You can see somebody put an outline around it, although it's not perfect. I know in the secular world, they cannot have humans and dinosaur-like creatures or even these flying reptiles living side by side with man. So when Native Americans drew this particular image, They were like, no, this can't be one. So they've tried to come up with all sorts of reinterpretations, and this is one of them that sometimes comes under attack by the secular world. They want to reinterpret this. They say, well, maybe that's a man on top, and maybe kind of in the middle part, maybe that's like an alien bent over, and then you see a snake, and they just kind of try to put it all together. But really, if you just look at it without those preconceived notions, it does resemble some sort of flying reptile.
Again, I photographed this claim being made in the Creation Museum lobby in a display case entitled Dragon Depictions Around the World. To my knowledge, this display still stands in the museum. The same photo also appears in the organization's New Answers book. The Black Dragon Canyon pictograph is at least 1,000 years old. In the 1940s, a guy named John Simonson used chalk to outline what he thought the edges of the painting were. He saw in it a winged monster. Although chalking was commonly practiced at the time, marking the outline of pictographs is now illegal, and Simonson's abominable white border effacing the piece is responsible for why modern creationists still maintain its interpretation. In fact, this claim became so popular that in 2015, the university rock art experts Jean-Louis Lequelec, Marvin Rowe, and Paul G. Bond went out of their way to perform formal analysis on it. First, they used an X-ray fluorescence gun to parse out the actual boundaries of the original image. Lequelec, Rowe, and Bond were able to probe the elemental concentration of the iron-rich red ochre pigment at different points throughout this painting, and they showed through variance in elemental concentration readings what the original boundaries of its application were. They found that the original elements of the image had been blurred by weathering to produce the illusion of a single image. As a final corroborating nail in the coffin, the scientists then used a digital enhancement program called D-Stretch that's specifically designed to parse out and contrast enhanced petroglyphic images, and has even been adopted to clarify Mars rover images by NASA. Essentially, D-Stretch is digitally analogous to multispectral imaging. The program algorithm is designed to contrast and exaggerate slight variations in hue in order to disassociate visual noise, then to mute it. In the decorrelation stretch that Lequelec sent me, you can clearly see that our pterosaur is actually a blurred composition of two human figures, a serpent and two quadrupeds, classic subjects depicted in the Indian Barrier Canyon style. Yeah, great job, Answers in Genesis, you really nailed that one.
And the reason why I had that section is that when you read it, it's just so incredible, like how little research they did behind these displays, like the absolute like almost arrogance of the things that they're claiming. But if they can't even be trusted, for example, with simple things like the Narmer tablet, which you can go read the whole Wikipedia article on, and it refutes this idea, then it kind of casts a lot of doubt on their ability to interpret much more scientifically recondite phenomena.